Hello, my lovely listeners. This is Ragini Anand on 27th of April 2021. Today is a Tuesday, of course, and it is the full moon. And we are talking today about fun and recreation. It's the first in the series of fun and recreation. So we will be looking at what is it that the Vedic culture sees or interprets fun and recreation to be. Before we get into that, though, let's just look at the cosmic alignment Vedically of today. And it's always really interesting to say, okay, well, it's the full moon. And not any old full moon, it's the Chandragupta full moon. Now, what does that mean? Chandragupta is the writer of the Akashic records. He basically is seen to keep tab of all that we do, whether it's good or bad. He transcribes our thoughts, actions, and deeds in the space element, and it's permanently there then. And Yama, the god of death, when he takes us to the, reviews what we have done at the end of our death, he looks at these Akashic records written by Chandragupta. Now, so Chandragupta is somebody who's revered, and in the Vedic culture, you're meant to, on a full moon night, such as today in many parts of the world, you get conscious of Chandragupta. Think of all the things that has been written about you and your life in the Akashic records, and ask for forgiveness, or ask for corrections, or ask for removal of karma on a day like this, to realign yourself in such a way that your future can be different. So that's the first kind of cosmic occurrence of today. And very importantly, it's also what we call Hanuman's birthday. Hanuman is famously known as the main character, one of the main characters of Ramayana, very badly coined as the monkey god. I don't like to use that term. However, you will have seen him being depicted. Now, his greatness is that he's seen as one of the most surrendered being, who surrendered his entire life to Rama. So if you want to study a story of surrender and what that can mean and bring to your life, then Hanuman's consciousness is what you would like to emulate. With that surrender, he brings the most incredible connection with Rama, his chosen deity, and he's able to achieve things in his life which would otherwise be unachievable. So it's a great story for you to draw from and become aware of on Hanuman's birthday today. Hanuman Janmashtami is celebrated in India with fervor, and Hanuman Chalisa, which are the 40 verses dedicated to Hanuman, which when recited can bring incredible clearance in one's life and invoke bhakti. Bhakti meaning devotion. So those are the two main kind of cosmic alignments of today, which I wanted you to become conscious of. And we're going to move into this topic, fun and recreation, which is one of the 8 segments of the wheel of life. When we're looking at various parts of our life, we at least have one segment which we call, well, how much time are we dedicating or effort are we dedicating to fun and recreation? Now, when I looked at this for the first time from a sort of the Vedic eyes, I have to say I was struggling. I was thinking, even as we started or ended last week, and I thought, what am I going to say about fun and recreation in the Vedic culture? Because really, fun and recreation is not seen as being something separate that you do away from life. Life in itself is seen as fun and recreation, and there is the main, if you like, distinction or differentiation between the Vedic culture and any other culture. So this thought really took me into a journey, and I have to say it was a really remarkable click in preparing for this talk that I have had personally myself. Now, what I recall is my early part of my youth was very much steeped in the Vedic culture. So I was living with my grandmother in India, in Mumbai, and then also spent some time with my parents in Africa. And I was thinking, well, what did they see as, fun and recreation? What did they instill in me at that age? Because remember, I have a mixed kind of culture, because since my youth I've then migrated to the West, and then I've also enjoyed or understood what fun and recreation means in that culture. And they're starkly different. And I recall that as a youngster, there was never a sort of a holiday planned with the family. This idea of postponing fun to another time period in your calendar just didn't happen. Fun happened all throughout your day. And it's what I now distinctly see as, you are in the flow. A lot of people say when they're in India, or when they are in that kind of a culture, whether it's China, Japan, or India, mainly India though, these are cultures that have this idea of fun and recreation not being separate to what we do. You feel like you're in the flow. You're just flowing. There's no postponed time frame. You don't say, oh, well, when I sit down and have my coffee, that's when I'm going to have fun and recreation. Or when I go on a holiday, that's going to be my fun and recreation. Or when I go to the gym, there just isn't that kind of alignment or distinction made in that culture. So that really kind of I thought, wow, that's quite a significant kind of click that I've had. What does that mean? I cannot recall as a child having any sort of significant family holidays. And then I thought, well, what was done? What was seen as fun and recreation as a youngster growing up at that time? Now, I remember going to temples or doing rituals or festivals were always the fun and recreation. So, for instance, Navratri is something that happens twice a year. Navratri means 9 nights of the goddess. Okay, that's when the world is abundantly conscious of the goddess energy on the earth plane. So we've just come through the 9 nights of the Navratri, of the spring Navratri, and and wherever you are in the world, you will feel a change of kind of pace. In here in London, we've seen blossoms emerge. There is a distinct time frame when everything beautiful on the earth plane begins to happen in the springtime, and that's the spring Navratri. So as a youngster, I would, spring, just before the Navratri, I can remember we would, my grandmother and we would clean the house to welcome in the 9 goddesses, the 9 nights, and each night there is a distinct goddess that turns up to, for you to revel in. So the first 3 nights will be the nights of Durga, okay, to clear your karma. The following 3 nights will be the nights of Lakshmi, when you bring in the wealth consciousness. And then the final 3 nights at Saraswati, having wisdom and knowledge. So these 9 nights in around March, April time was significant. We would clean the house, we would throw away old spices and old pulses and old flour and things that all vegetarian households have in their larder. And then we would clean everything and buy new clothes, buy new food items. And that would be our ritual. And that would be what we would have fun and recreation with. So that happened in the spring Navratri. And then towards the September, October time frame, which is what we would see in the West as autumn, when the sustenance of the trees is going back to the roots, going into the roots, when everything is falling, again, we would do the same thing. It would be a ritual. So why am I telling you this? Now, these were the things that I remember as my fun and recreation. So I can remember with my grandmother, just before the Navratri, we would plant wheat. Okay, so children were taught how to plant, from wheat or rice or whatever, and watch the grass shoots grow. And that would be my fun. Wow, look at this. I've just planted 50 wheat seeds, and this is this beautiful grass that begins to grow. And then you revere that grass by doing a puja of sorts. And young girls especially were expected to fast during those 9 days and not sleep. And I remember doing those rituals, and it was so much fun. That was what I saw as fun, because young girls like me from the neighborhood would come together in the night, and we were fasting, so we could only eat fruits and dried fruits and nuts, and the whole thing, now I look back at it and I realize that it was done to prepare you for all eventualities, because women, if there was a famine or problem in life, she has to be able to go without food, and that prepared you that there were times when you can fast, there were times when you can detox. It was a detoxification, really. And the girls would come in the night, and we would tell each other stories and try and stay up all night. And it's a very famous tradition, and it's dying now, sadly. But that was our fun and recreation, okay? And that happened twice a year. Now, the other main moments I can recall is whenever we went to, temple visits. In India, there are many remote temples that you would visit, and I did many with my grandmother. And also hot springs where you would go and bathe and those sorts of things, which also happens in Japan, by the way. So in Japan too, I see this culture where fun and recreation is seen as detoxification, relaxing in an onsen in Japan, or going on temples. I've been to so many temples in Japan, and it becomes a place where you congregate with your family, and your fun and holiday happens around those resorts. So that there's a huge distinction. Now, as I started to meditate on these two types of living and ideas around fun and recreation, it dawned on me that one culture, the Vedic culture, is very much focused on the being, what we call the being way of living. And in the West, we are very much in the doing way of living. Okay, so doing is extremely revered in the West, and in some cultures, being is revered. And it's very important to understand the distinctions. It's not that one is better or worse, it is just that there is a cultural difference. And we are here to talk about the Vedic culture and how it sees fun and recreation. So I think it'll be an expansion for you as well as it was for me to just understand what it is to be implanted in a doing culture and what is it to be implanted in being culture. Now I'm going to kind of give you some distinctions. But before we do that, just let's, and many psychologists and sociologists have done research on being cultures and doing cultures. You can name the doing cultures as Germany, Israel, Canada, New Zealand, UK, and US. So these are all highly organized doers and cultures embedded in the idea of doing. And then other cultures, the being cultures, who are they? The psychologists and the sociologists have called India a being culture, Japan, China, Iran, Brazil, Colombia, and Kenya. Okay, these are just to give you an idea. Now, if any of you have traveled, in one of these cultures, you will notice that there is a distinct difference. When you travel to these countries, there is a very stark difference, isn't there? So let's just look at what fun and recreation might mean if you're in the doing culture of the Western traditions. Here, working to live is the model, okay? In the being culture, living to work is the model. There is a very stark difference. Working to live, in that Western culture, the fun and recreation is definitely pigeonholed into time frames, holidays, coffee breaks, lunch breaks. When you're doing, you're just doing. Work is seen as a means to an end. You work now to enjoy later, that kind of culture. In the being culture, work is seen as a necessity for life itself. And you work now, but you enjoy now as well. So there's no kind of separation. And then the doing culture is very status orientated and focused, and busy. Whereas the being culture, the Vedic culture would be status is an inner state. It's never lost. It's not a label. It's an inner way of being. And it's not a busy, busy, busy. Quality of life is the emphasis in a being culture. In the doing culture of the West, meeting goals is very important, and often that's done at the neglect of family and friends. Whereas in the being culture, work-life balance and relationships are central. If you're not enjoying your time with your family, then it's not seen as fun and recreation. That's the other thing I noticed. Whenever we went on holiday when I was young, it would be to a friend's house or a family house, and I used to think, why can't we go to a hotel? Why do we have to go to a friend and a family? But now, having done this exercise, I can understand why there is the emphasis is on spending quality time with your family. And this is why weddings are huge events, funerals are huge, lengthy events, birthdays are huge events in the Vedic culture. You probably know, if you know anybody Indian in your life, that a wedding can go on for 7 days. It's an affair of the highest kind. 3,000 people would be a small wedding. So this makes you understand that the idea or concept of fun and recreation is very different. Whereas in the West, if I told my husband we're going to spend 7 days, who's from Scotland, at a wedding, he would probably tear his hair out. What do you mean 7 days for a wedding? It's too much. Or 7 days in a family home, it's too much. So the doing culture is all about what you do. Okay, what you do is important. In the being culture, who you are and what's underneath all the doing is more important. So, very, very different, isn't it? The focus is totally on going deeper into the layers of your being inwardly. Doing is outwardly focused, being culture is inwardly focused. And fun and recreation, therefore, in the being culture is also inwardly focused. It's going to deeper inward layers of our inner self. Whereas the doing culture is more material and more focused outwardly, to have fun outwardly. So that, for me, was a very huge click, extremely huge click. And I thank you all for inviting me to this platform to make me understand myself better and why it is that I'm so kind of, troubled, with these two ways of kind of seeing life. And I have to now say, to myself, what do I resonate most with now that I understand the difference? Before it was a blur, why is it I feel one way when I'm in these being culture type environments, and why do I feel another way? I'm not saying one is better or worse. There's very different experiences. And as I get older, I draw more towards the being way of enjoying or creating fun and recreation. And I believe post-COVID, this is my prediction, that the world will move more towards the being type of activities, where fun and recreation will be reformed. The idea, as we find that we can't travel as much and we can't afford to travel in the ways that we used to, COVID passports and all the paraphernalia that one has to go through to just travel. We're going to say, you know what? I'm going to start planting some seeds and see how they grow and make a little garden or go for a nice walk or spend some quality time with my family. So, how are we going to keep ourselves interested doing that? One will have to draw from the Vedic culture, in my view. One will have to look at rituals and ways of congregating, and maybe spiritual realms will become more interesting. So if you look at the problem with the doing culture is a continued feeling. You always have this feeling in the doing culture that whatever we are doing, we would like to be doing something else. So I'm working, but I've got my watch on and I'm keeping an eye on my clock, and when is it going to be 5 o'clock, and when can I get out so I can now cross the barrier and move into a time called fun. And so fun is, this makes us feel bad for large proportions of our time when we are in this mode of operation. And now I recall why. When I am now just being, I can enjoy just cutting vegetables. I'm not conscious that I'm actually doing any work. There's no thought involved in the being model of living. And as people who congregate here as seekers, then that's the quality that we want to get to. I'm assuming that we want to get into this thoughtless zone, this just being, just allowed to be who we are deeply, without the constant, oh, I'm now in the fun mode and now I'm in work mode. I'm doing now and now I'm having fun. But in none of those boxes you're actually being. Because what happens in that, because there's time pressure for fun, we drown our sorrows by, doing all crazy, we're going to have a crazy meal and we're going to spend a lot of money and that's how we're going to have fun, and we're going to drink a lot and we're going to, and then we're conscious that that too is going to end. And that stop and start, to me, feels like pressure. We push the way we want to be into the future, but we never get there. And we're always longing for that real deep sense of fun and recreation. And occasionally we get glimpse of it, on holiday, maybe after the second week of unwinding, we start being. But it's so, random. How can we have that feeling of being relaxed in whatever we are doing? Has to come from this state of being, in my opinion. So, looking back at my life, I think I was in a vicious circle downwards when I look at the doing culture. And yes, doing culture has its outcome. You achieve things. It's a process-driven world where you do A before B before C and you have outcomes. And, there is a need for it, but until you understand or visualize or experience more and more time of the Vedic being culture, stuff just happens automatically. You're in the flow. And my husband, who is from the doing culture and a big doer, I know he notices in Japan and in India now when we travel that there is something very different, and he longs to feel that. he although he's a doer, he doesn't relax as much as he does in India than he does anywhere else. So whenever we make holidays now, we tend to go that way for that experience of flowing. It's the kind of mind that you get when you are immersed in the Vedic being culture, is that there is nothing to do and nowhere really to go. You're in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing. You kind of surrendered in some way. And every moment is fun. Every moment is recreation. Now, doing has something to do with past, present, and future. You are when you're in the doing culture, you're drawing from the past in the present to create some future outcome. In the being culture, it's direct, it's immediate, it's close relationship with the present moment. You're doing nothing other than the present moment. Allowing naturally happens in the Vedic culture because there is no goal or standard to achieve. There's nothing really to achieve. And there's something beautiful about that. We put too much stress onto ourselves. And it's become really outcome orientated, our lives, when we live like this. And it's very materialistic, therefore. But if we can emulate some of the Vedic culture where it's process orientated rather than an outcome orientated life, and rather than being materially focused, you value relationships and quality of life. So when you get up, your first thought is, well, what are we going to eat today? And has everybody been involved in the decision making of what are we going to eat? And I remember when I'm in India with my mother and my brother, and the first thing, we would wake up, we would relax, we would have a tea, we make kind of, have a little chat or a banter, and then, what do you want to eat today? What would you like to eat? Everybody has a conversation, and then a kind of plan emerges from that, and there's pride and honor and dignity, and everybody is this kind of idea of selflessness that I've only experienced with my grandmother and my mother. They're so selfless in the sense that they'll make you anything, they'll do anything for you. If there's a beautiful term, like a pet name that parents call you, they call you beta. Beta is a loving term. My husband even loves it now. Beta, what do you want to eat? In that loving voice. And you automatically feel like you're in the flow. And food seems to be the kind of the unifying force. And there's always this idea of doing what is best for the society, that happens there. So, for instance, I've noticed when I am in those kinds of cultures, somebody will just pop into your house. There's no invitations required. A neighbor will arrive and they'll say, oh, what are you doing today? And you'll say, oh, I'm packaging this box. I want to send it to England. And they say, oh, let me ring, there's a chap who just comes home and he'll weigh it and, he'll send it. So you have a tea and a call is made and the chap actually arrives. He makes a list of items in the box. Everything gets done. He takes it away. He stitches it, beautifully in a jute bag and everything is done so beautifully. And then he takes it away and the problem's solved. I mean, and in the doing culture, my goodness, if I have to take a box anywhere, I have to, I have to ship it. It's a real trauma. I've got to carry it. I'm not physically built to carry such a box. I've got to either pray through the nose to have it done. Nobody will come and do it, etc., etc. So I think I'm kind of getting my point across to the two very different mode of operation, and what the Vedic culture kind of guides you towards. The doing culture is very much about me and independence and self-reliance and achievement orientation and competition. You have to be assertive, and you're always seeking pleasure outside of what you're doing. And it's self-interest. But the Vedic culture seems to be operating from this being which is we is the center, socially independent. There's this idea of connectedness. You know, it's cooperative rather than, competitive. It's obedience and self-sacrificing in some sense, and sensitive. All these words came to my head when I was kind of doing, one is very subjective. As I said, it's more inward. And it thrives on unstructured time, the Vedic culture, whereas the doing culture, unstructured time makes people difficult, feel difficult. What do you mean I'm not doing anything? It can't be possible. They don't know how to relax even once that habit is formed. I mean, I know I suffered from that. What do you mean I'm not doing anything? So the cultures are extremely different based on the base philosophy. And, it really struck me that fun and recreation is very, very different. So I'd like to, think about your inner voice sometimes when you have a time, and say, when have you felt like you've really been yourself and just allowed to enjoy whatever it is you're doing, and that feeling has lasted for a length of time? That you're not pressurized to get up and do the next thing. Like when you're reading, are you really just reading, or are you thinking, oh, now I've got to go and do X? Are you really enjoying intensely the moment of inactivity or a slight activity? So if you're cutting a carrot, do you get very involved in it? Like how certain different knife types will cut a carrot more easily than another knife type, a serrated knife for a tomato. What is the core in the carrot? Why is it then? Why do some people take it out? And can you eat the leaves or not eat the leaves? And why does it grow underground? And all those kinds of thoughts that emerge. They're not actually thoughts, they're awareness. It's a difference. It's a thought would be, oh, I've now got to go and put the laundry on. That's a thought. An awareness is playing with whatever it is that you're involved in and becoming intensely, cascadingly involved with it, so that you're becoming more and more and more aware of all its qualities. That brings me to an incredible experience I had once trying to learn the art of sushi making in Japan by a very revered chef. And I was thinking, really, what's the big fuss about? This, it's a bit of rice wrapped in some nori sheet. What can you possibly learn from it? What can you make? And this guy, this chef who works in the Grand Hyatt in Tokyo, he had spent 20 years just making sushi day in, day out. And I was so, I don't know how to even describe it. 3 hours with him, I learned so much in that 3 hours that it almost made me weep. That the art of picking up just enough rice. Every pocket of rice he picked up was always the same weight. When he chopped, he was teaching me how to make vegetarian sushi. Would you believe it? And he used okra, he used leek, he used, he made ties with leaves to stick the various elements together. I mean, everything was a piece of art. Even when he cut, he was flowing with it, he was dancing with it. And he taught me this art of being, never being bored with what you're doing, always being intense, living to work, not work to live. And it was like a moment when my thinking just changed. It was like a switch. I moved from a doing mindset to a being mindset. It was a real line in the sand for me. And just his pride of doing the same thing day in, day out with so much enthusiasm, so much love, so much passion, that if that doesn't teach, I don't know what can, because he's going deeper and deeper and deeper into the understanding of all the things that he uses as his ingredients and his art. He's a true master of his arts. So I think where we're heading, if you look at the positives of the times, I know if you look at the news, it's all doom and gloom, and we're all gonna die and perish, and it appears to be that way, and we're in a mental collapse. But I truly believe that whereas we were outwardly focused, we are beginning to go inward. Now, if we don't find methodology of making inwardly focused culture interesting, then we're going to fold and get into a depressed state. But if we were to learn a bit from the Vedic culture, which is the oldest culture on the earth plane, how did they do it? They became conscious of, the cosmology of things. So today is a full moon. What does it mean? Let me now, think about Chandragupta. What can I do with him? What temple should I go to today because it's Hanuman's day? How can I engage in his consciousness? What are the things I need to do to become more of a surrendered state to the deity of my choice? What is it to be a disciple? What is it to be devotional? All these things that your mind wouldn't automatically go to will go to if we design a culture that allows us to go inwards. Because if the outward focused world is going to be about shopping and Amazon and more Netflix and more things online, it's going to just burn us out. We're going to just collapse. We're going to get depressed. We're going to have to go inward with some methodology to become more and more how can I say, connected with ourselves in a meaningful way whilst keeping our interest alive, intense, making us, more and more vibrant, more and more going to a higher and higher frequency, rather than depleting ourselves and folding, being positive and powerful. So, the deity that came to my mind that is the deity of choice when we look for fun and recreation. And if for 1 minute you're going to allow me to say that true fun and recreation means that you are doing the right thing for you at the right moment with the right person. So everything is right in that moment. The deity of the choice that allows you to become that is Kala Bhairava, the Lord of Time. Okay, Kala Bhairava is a deity that is, if you like, if you look at Shiva in the Vedic culture, the Lord of all lords, when he becomes slightly denser, let's say, from his very fine state, the first thing that emerges is time and space. Now that Lord, when time and space emerges from the nothingness where Shiva lives, that place is Kala Bhairava, or that being is Kala Bhairava. Okay? So revere Kala Bhairava. Find out everything you can about him. He doesn't have any karma, because when you're beyond time and space, just beyond, you have no karma. You're pure. And I've just come back from India, and I've got all my hairs are standing on ends. I was in Banaras, where he has his temple, his power spot. They say that if you've been to Banaras and you don't go to the Kala Bhairava temple, your entire pilgrimage of going to Varanasi is it's wasted. And I remember going there very early in the morning, on the 8th moon, which is his day, okay? And you have to go at sort of 4 o'clock in the morning. And the thing you offer Kala Bhairava, believe it or not, is cigars, alcohol, meat. And you think, what? In a Vedic culture, that's what you would do? But I understood why only recently. So he's beyond karma. He's beyond, he's a protector God. Protects those that worship him, those that go to him, those that go more towards their being state. Where there is no karma, there's nothing you can do which is right or wrong. You're beyond that, beyond the dualities. It's a beautiful thing to become slowly aware of. All these little things that sound nonsensical and ridiculous begin to become clearer and clearer, and your inner voice begins to kind of sing the praises of this culture that so beautifully kind of gives you this inner experience. So Kala Bhairava, Om Kala Bhairavaya Namaha, you can just start with that mantra, become aware of him. Kala means time. Yes, so he is the Lord of space and time. There is actually a very famous temple in Ujjain called the Mahakaleshwar, which is where Shiva is in the form of Mahakaleshwar. Mahakal, Maha meaning the greatest time and space aspect of Shiva. And a lot of the Vedic academians would argue that place is the real meridian of time. I know we now have a meridian at Greenwich in London, but the real ancient meridian of time was definitely at Ujjain, from where time kind of cosmically, emerges. So, yes, somebody has just posted something. They offer ash there, human ash, and that there is a significance to that as well. And I'm not going to go into that here because I might start turning people off and all sorts of questions will arise, which I don't want to get into. I want to leave you on a high note. I want you to think about these two starkly different ways of existing, the doing way and the being way, and see if anything I said resonates, and whether you can mix and match, which is what I do. I do mix and match. Sometimes I'm a doer and sometimes I'm a beer. But I need to be more and more in this being state to feel fulfilled. It is a marriage of two, and the middle ground is always the best. So please think about it, and please become aware of it. And I'm sure you weren't thinking that I would be going into this kind of a talk when we were doing fun and recreation. But there you go. It's very interesting, isn't it, that when you challenge yourself to think about a topic from another standpoint, you come up and your inner teacher will teach you things that you wouldn't believe were possible, and you have an expansion. I've certainly had an expansion of understanding my own living methodology and why I revere certain things and not revere other things. So with that, I'm going to open up for any questions you may have. I've enjoyed doing this talk for you. So please post your questions, or please unmute yourself and ask me a question if you have. So I've got here, Paramashiva is saying, thank you, Maragini, for being you and for absolutely wonderful session. We all know Indian society is changing and getting more into the doing culture. Why the mind falls for the doing culture? What is the main thing one should be cautious about to conquer the mind from falling into doing culture? Yes, I know that we're all trying to emulate one culture. But listen, one culture is going to cause so many problems for us, just like in our body. Okay, we have good bacteria, bad bacteria, hundreds of different, millions, if not billions of different bacteria in our gut. And if we just said we're going to have a monoculture, we're just going to be all doers, in our chemistry, we're just going to have that bacteria that just does things, you'll soon die. Yes? The beauty of life is in understanding what you're taking on, what you're giving up for emulating another culture and giving up your culture. What are you giving up is a very important question to ask. I'm not saying that we can't mix and match and everything else, but anybody who says one culture, one book, one God, one this, one that, you're doomed, I'm telling you, because life doesn't work like that. Look out. if you just had an orchard of apples and nothing else, you're going to kill yourself from boredom. Emulate life. And life is just being, isn't it? We look out the window in nature, it's just being. It's doing as well, but it's mostly just being. It's being what it's designed to be. And so yes, taking on another culture, fine, but not at the cost of removing yours. So Paramashivoham is saying, sending you and everyone the bliss of the beautiful full moon and a very happy Hanuman Jayanti to all. Yes, I agree. And then you posted this video from They Offered Human Ash to this Linga by Sadhguru. And there is a whole reason and from antiquity for that, and if you want to research that, please go ahead and do that. So any other questions, please unmute and ask. I would like to hear a voice. If not, then we have our second in the series, and we will go deeper into these two modes of operation, and we'll look at some power spots. Somebody's asking me here how to get yourself to the point of just being, and how do I raise my awareness in day-to-day life? That's a really good question, isn't it? Because we're on this kind of habit. We have a habit. You literally, you have a list, and some people even have lists of lists, and they're just tick box, tick box, tick box, tick box. How do you get out of that habit? My suggestion is that you carve out a large enough proportion of time, let's say 4 hours on a daily basis, when you say, I'm just going to tune into myself and say, well, what can I be doing that will bring me joy? If I'm reading, just park yourself in the reading and really read between the lines of what you're reading. That's a good way to start. Or if you're listening to music, listen to the silent notes between the two notes, the silence between notes. Become aware of it. Because you could argue that it's the silence between the two notes that's allowing the music to happen. So whereas you're always listening to music, become aware of the silence. It's just a technique. Or listen to the lyrics intently. Listen to the tones of the voice, the intonations, the punctuations. Become aware of that. And anything you do, get very involved and intense. Give it your all. Let your mind not wander to the next thing and the next thing and the thought from the past or the thought of a future. I mean, all the masters have been trying to teach this, but it sounds very hard, but it really isn't. It's just letting go of activity and this intense need to always be doing. Doing for what? What's the outcome? So just be who you are intensely. So thank you for so beautifully saying the word being in reply to my question. I felt it till there. Saktipat. Okay, much love and peace to you. Thank you, Dazamora. Thank you, everybody. It's a lovely way to leave you thinking about how to become more you and going deeper into yourself by being. Doing is an outward layer, okay? It's a layer outside your core. If you peel that doing layer off like an onion skin, the inner is the being layer. And after the being, there are more layers to peel off, but start with the being. And let's come back next week and maybe share how you experienced it. That would be nice. It's all very monologue-y at the moment. I wish we could have more of an interaction. But maybe next week we can share. I'll let a couple of you share what you experienced at the being level. So with that, I'm going to allow you to have fun and recreation in all times, at all times, whatever you're doing. And that is my wish for you. So with that, I'll say bye.